Now we're going to work on decorating our card, and we can use the die from the Tasteful Touches set. It's not actually called Tasteful Touches as the die. It's called Tasteful Labels. Anyway, so I'm not going to show how to cut this out, but basically that's how I made this shape here, is with this shape on the Tasteful Labels. So what we'll do, if you want to cut that out, is you'll go ahead and you'll just cut out the same color as layer 1 with this die, and I'm going to do that off camera. And then with the donkeys, they don't have dies that go with them, so we do a fussy cut for those. So I'm going to go cut this out. I'll come back and I will show you how to do the stamping. I know you probably already know how to do the stamping, but that's okay. I'll show you anyway. And then I will also show you how we color in these donkeys. Using 2 of the Tasteful Labels dies, I cut from the layer 1 color, which is the dark brown, 2 different shapes. So I cut this shape using this die, and then instead of stamping this directly onto layer 2, I cut out this shape, and we're going to stamp the sentiment directly onto this shape. And I mean, if you want to stamp it directly onto layer 2 like I did here, you can. I'm just kind of mixing it up a little bit. So I'm going to put away my dies because I like to have all of my stamps and dies nicely organized. I like to know when I'm looking for them, where I'm going to find them. I like to keep them stored on magnetic sheets. And when they go with a stamp set, I like to keep them in the stamp case. And when they don't have a stamp set that they go with, I like to keep them on the magnetic sheet and put them in a binder in sheet protectors. We're going to stamp our sentiments, and this newsflash sentiment comes from the Approaching Perfection stamp set, which is part of the Celebration promotion. And, you know, you can use another sentiment. I just thought that one was kind of funny. Newsflash, birthdays found to be good for health. Studies show that people who have more birthdays live longest. Yes, I would agree. Okay, so I've got the stamp mounted on the acrylic block, and I'm going to use this Stays On black ink. And for this, I like to have a corner of my rag, my towel wet, because sometimes I end up getting ink around the very edges here of the stamp, and I don't like how that looks when I stamp it. So I'll apply the ink. If I have any ink around the edges here, then I'll wipe it with the wet corner of my towel. Now I will blow warm air from my mouth onto that stamp to reactivate the ink, and I will apply it as centered as I can over this die that I cut, or over the piece that I cut out of the die. Okay, lift it. There we go. I like to put the lid on my stamp pad as soon as I can. I'm gonna set this aside. I like to clean my stamps as soon as I use them. So I'm using the Stampin' Up! Stampin' Scrub. I have the Stays On stuff sprayed on one side, and so I rub my stamp against that, make sure it's clean, and then I rub it against the other side to get that oiliness off. And I'm not going to show how to do that on camera again, but that's what I'm going to end up doing to clean off the next one. Okay, so I'm going to take this stamp off, put it back in the case, close the case and put it aside. Now I'm going to stamp all of the donkeys and the sentiments. So the first sentiments that I'm going to stamp are going to be Yeehaw And we could do any one we want, but I'm gonna do Yeehaw, It's Your Birthday. And I'm gonna make sure that those are actually going to apply where I want them. So actually it might be best. I don't have ink on them at this point. I'm just laying them on the label that I cut. I'm going to put the ink acrylic block over it. Now I'm going to make sure, by doing that, I made sure that the sentiments are going to be where I want them. Ink that up. Make sure I don't have ink anywhere I don't want it. Apply it here to the sentiment tag. There you go. Gonna set that aside. Gonna clean our stamps between each use, and I'm gonna put the lid back on because I don't want my stamp pad to dry out. For the donkeys, I'm going to stamp them. I'm gonna stamp them on the basic white cardstock, and the reason I'm gonna do that is because that is really nice cardstock for using the blender markers. The reason why we're using Stays On is because it's a permanent ink, and we're going to need that because we're going to color in the donkeys with the alcohol markers, and if we don't use permanent ink, then the ink's going to move around when we color in the donkeys, and that's bad news. And you can actually use any stamps that you want on this. You don't have to use the donkeys. I just thought the donkeys were cute, and there are a whole lot of things with flowers and blah blah blah. I didn't want to do flowers. So we're going to end up cutting around the donkeys. So we're going to cut kind of close like we did here to kind of mimic a die, but we don't have a die. So anyway, when we stamp the donkeys on the page, we want to make sure that we leave enough room around them that we can fussy cut, is what we call it. Don't know why we call it that. That's just what I hear it called. Anyway, we're going to fussy cut around those donkeys. Okay, assuming I don't mess anything up while I'm coloring, we should be done with that stamp set and our ink pad and our block, so we can set them aside.